Welcome to 30 minutes of VOA Learning English, the voice of America's information service for people learning English. Join us now for the Agriculture Report and Science in the News, coming up after As It Is.
Hello, and welcome to As It Is from VOA Learning English. I'm June Sims. Today on the program, a growing number of people in Washington are riding bicycles to work, and they are saving a lot of money by doing it.
When a person makes a change from only using a car to using a bike, they're saving anywhere between $8,000 or $9,000 a year.
More and more people in Taipei, Taiwan are also riding bicycles to work, but that is causing its own problems, as Jim Tedder reports.
The city of Taipei, Taiwan, is offering its 2.6 million people a fast, low-cost way to travel around the city. City officials have launched a bicycle rental program called Ubike. Many Taiwanese are now using bicycles to go to work and other places. But the growing popularity of the program has led to new traffic problems. 5 years ago, motor scooters competed with taxis and buses for space on Taipei's narrow streets. Then the city supported a plan to start loaning bicycles to people who pay for their temporary use. Taipei followed the examples of places like Kyoto, Japan, the Chinese city of Hangzhou, and Daejeon in South Korea. Since then, Taipei has loaned bicycles 11 million times, mostly during the past year. Bikers do not pay for the first half hour of use. Each 30 minutes after that costs less than half an American dollar. Xu Cai-tong is a 37-year-old office worker. She rides a rented bicycle to parks, a university, and her workplace. She says one good thing about renting is that the first 30 minutes are free. And she says biking is good because she does not move around much in her office job during the day. Waiting for a bus would mean spending time, which she saves by riding a bike. She calls biking a natural choice. Ms. Xu is not alone. Using the one-speed bicycles works well for many Taiwanese. The bikes can be left at any of more than 100 rental stations. The vehicles could also ease air pollution, which is a health problem in many Asian cities. In China, for example, the city of Shanghai reported record pollution levels in December. The levels were nearly 20 times above the level considered safe by the World Health Organization. Shen Chu-hung is with Taiwan's Environmental Protection Agency. He wants to know whether bikes have reduced Taipei's pollution. Bad air has been found to endanger commuters and people living on low building floors. Mr. Shen says Taiwan is studying whether the rental program has reduced air pollution. He is not discussing its effectiveness at present, in case the study finds that bike renters walked or rode public transportation in the past. And it appears that the 5,350 bikes on the streets of Taipei today have begun to cause new problems for city traffic. People who bike through the streets have to worry about cars making illegal sudden stops and fast right turns. Some bikers have stopped riding on the streets and started riding their bikes on sidewalks. But this has angered or frightened many walkers. Huang Huang-chia works at the Taipei Department of Transportation. He says no one single kind of incident has happened repeatedly, But he says riders need to be better educated. He says the city's way of dealing with such incidents will be to educate people about every kind of bicycle safety needed in Taipei. Taipei plans to complete its program with a total of 162 rental stations by the end of this year. I'm Jim Tedder. You are listening to As It Is from VOA Learning English. Now back to June Sims for a report on the growing number of people using bicycles to get to work in Washington, D.C.
Traffic problems are an everyday concern in many cities, including Washington, D.C. A growing number of Washingtonians are turning to bicycles to get to and from work. In fact, the number of commuters who use bicycles has doubled in the city since 2007. Lauren Copsey recently opened a store called the Daily Rider in Northwest Washington. It targets people who use their bikes for transportation, not just for exercise and fun.
They put a lot of wear on their bikes, and they ride much different bikes than the typical sport rider.
Ralph Bueller teaches urban planning at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, popularly known as Virginia Tech. He has written a book about urban biking called City Cycling. He says there is a reason urban bike riding is now becoming more popular.
Over the last 60 to 70 years, cities in the U.S. have been adapted to the automobile.
To go about any place we want to go.
Most cities took advantage of the money coming for the interstate highway system from the federal government starting in 1956. There was a 90% federal match, so the cities only had to put up 10% and was very tempting.
In the years after World War II, many Americans moved to suburban communities just outside major cities. They decided to travel great distances to and from work in exchange for a home in the suburbs. Their cars became a symbol of freedom. But today, many people believe they can save money by living in the city. Greg Billing is with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association.
When a person makes a change from only using a car to using a bike, they're saving anywhere between $8,000 or $9,000 a year.
Greg Billing says store owners are also paying attention. His group puts racks for bicycles in front of businesses, including the Studio Theater where Scott Sanger works.
We actually have 4 theaters, and on any given night, whenever we have a performance, these racks are taken.
If you're a coffee shop or if you're a flower shop on their route, they're more likely to jump into that store.
For business owners, sometimes they may look at a cyclist and see an average purchase that's lower than somebody coming in a different mode, but what they're not maybe seeing is that that person's coming back more and more frequently.
Ralph Bueller says governments save money when people use bicycles.
Building bicycling facilities is much cheaper than building, maintaining road facilities or public transport.
The Department of Transportation spent $5 million over 2 years putting in place a bike rental system called Capital Bike Share. Today, the system has 20,000 members who share 1,660 bicycles. Washington, D.C. has also taken steps to protect bike riders. It approved a safe passing law and created areas on the road between cars and bikes. The United States Census Bureau says 4% of the city's workers ride to work by bike. The only city on the East Coast with more bike commuters is New York. And that's our program for today. Thank you for spending some of your time with us. We present a new As It Is every day at 0030 hours Universal Time. Mario Ritter will be here tomorrow with another As It Is. I'm June Sims reporting from VOA Learning English headquarters in Washington. Don't forget to listen to VOA World News at the beginning of the hour, Universal Time.
The Agriculture Report is next, followed by Science in the News. You can read and listen to our programs and download MP3s at learningenglish.voanews.com. You can learn with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The western United States is suffering from a severe lack of rain. This extreme dry weather condition is called a drought. The dry area includes the large state of California. Many of the fruits and vegetables eaten in the United States are grown there. Andy Domenegoni is a farmer in Riverside, California. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all farmed in the same area. He says farmers have good and bad years, and this year is one of the bad ones.
I have some fields that we planted almost a month ago are still not out of the ground.
He says it usually takes 5 to 7 days for the wheat to begin growing, but not this year. He shows us a brown field.
And as you can see behind me, this field was planted 2 weeks ago, and it is just bone dry. The seed is not in any moisture. It can't sprout. We got to wait for the rain.
Mr. Domenegoni is not the only person waiting for rain. Bill Patzert is a climatologist at NASA, the American Space Agency. He says drought conditions in the American West and Southwest have been getting worse for the past 10 years.
Ranchers in the West are selling off their livestock. Farmers all over the Southwest, from Texas to Oregon, are fallowing in their fields because of a lack of water. So for farmers and ranchers, this is a very painful drought.
Mr. Patzert says Southern California is dealing with the worst drought since officials began keeping records more than 135 years ago. Milt McGiffin is a field crop expert at the University of California. He says the drought in his state is going to affect many people for many years to come.
The short-term impact is going to be higher food prices. The longer-term impact is going to be you're just not going to have as much production in the country, and it's part of an overall trend for the next 50 years.
He says as the population increases, the amount of water for each person is decreasing, and he says that cannot continue. He says a technology solution is urgently needed. Bill Patzert of NASA says what happens on California farms affects Americans and people around the world. He says the California farms provide food for the United States and export food to the world. A United Nations report said world food prices in 2013 were among the highest ever. Food experts say they will not know how much the drought in the western U.S. will affect the price of food for 2014 until later this year. The experts agree that there is no easy or quick answer to the problem of making sure farmers have enough water to grow their crops. And that's the Agriculture Report. For more agriculture stories, go to our website, learningenglish.voanews.com, where you can also find transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports. I'm Christopher.
From VOA Learning English, this is Science in the News. I'm Christopher Cruz.
And I'm Faith Lapidus. Today, we tell about a World Health Organization report on spinal cord injuries. Then, we tell how American scientists have used stem cells to create lung cells in a laboratory. But first, we report on efforts to create an international database or electronic record of brain images. Organizers say the database could help researchers develop better ways to treat chronic, long-lasting pain.
Many people suffer from chronic pain. Their joints might hurt. They might develop a migraine headache with sharp pain in the head. Others might have pain in the stomach or abdomen. Many scientists now believe that chronic pain in any part of the body is linked to the brain. Scientists in California are now developing an international database of brain images of hundreds of chronic pain patients. The goal is to speed up research and develop better ways to treat people whose pain never completely goes away. Emmerin Meyer is a gastroenterologist at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles. Doctors like him study the stomach and intestines.
One of the big things in pain research has been the failure to really come up with, major breakthroughs in treatments.
Dr. Meyer hopes to develop treatments for people with chronic pain. He is working on a new field that links chronic pain to biological changes in the brain. The Oppenheimer Center for Neurobiology of Stress at UCLA is the headquarters for the first standardized database of brain imaging linked to chronic pain.
So I think a lot of people now agree with the concept that chronic pain is a brain disease. It may start anywhere in the body when you have acute pain, but once it becomes a chronic pain syndrome, it does become a brain disease.
Kirsten Tillish is a professor at the Division of Digestive Diseases at UCLA. She says the imaging database lets doctors look at treating the whole body, not just parts of it.
One of the failures of Western medicine, and I think also our research approaches, is how we've diced up the human body and we've diced up research into these little silos that work very independently.
Professor Meyer says Western scientists are starting to look more closely at how the mind, body, and environment influence each other.
Big data medicine and analysis is essentially doing the same thing that the ancient Chinese did by observation. We do it by observing and analyzing very large data sets and trying to see are there patterns in there that hang together biologically.
Professor Tillish says new technology makes that possible.
When I started this type of work 10 years ago, we didn't have computing power to do these types of analysis. So in the brain alone, in the last decade, it's really exploded what we could look at.
The database now has the brain scans of more than 500 patients from North America and Europe. UCLA is working to gather more. Professor Meyer hopes to include brain images of people from Asian countries in the database.
The World Health Organization says as many as 500,000 people suffer spinal cord injuries every year. And it says people with such injuries are much more likely to die early. Recently, the World Health Organization released a report called International Perspectives on Spinal Cord Injuries. Alana Officer works at the WHO. She says spinal cord injuries do more than just cause paralysis or lack of movement.
There are a lot more associated health problems, such as difficulty with bowel and bladder function, difficulty with sexual function, associated problems around mental health conditions. So it's much broader than just experiencing paralysis.
Alana Officer is the WHO's coordinator for disability and rehabilitation. She says the main causes of spinal cord injuries are traffic accidents, falls, and violence. She says some causes are more common in certain areas.
For example, road traffic crashes are the main contributors of spinal cord injury in Africa and the Western Pacific region. Falls tend to be the leading cause in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And then we have high rates of violence in certain countries. We have high rates in the US, we have high rates in South Africa. And then we've also got the non-traumatic causes of spinal cord injury, such as tumours and cancers, tuberculosis and spina bifida.
Most people think of tuberculosis as a lung disease. But in some African countries, it is responsible for about 1/3 of the non-violent spinal cord injuries. The birth defect spina bifida causes damage to the spine. In severe cases, it can affect walking and daily activities. Health officials say they do not yet know the exact cause of spina bifida, but they say it may be linked to genes and the environment. Alana Officer says more men than women suffer spinal cord injuries.
There's a ratio of about 2-to-1 of males to females. Men tend to be more likely to experience spinal cord injury between the ages of about 20 and 29. Women, or certainly girls much younger, between sort of 15 and 19. So that's our first peak in young people. And then we get a second peak, interestingly, in older people. And the major driver of that is falls, tumours, cancer, etc.
She says the main reason people with spinal cord injuries are more likely to die early is lack of medical care.
A lot of people with spinal cord injuries, certainly in low and middle income countries, do not get appropriate emergency response care. Mortality rates are very strongly affected by the quality of the healthcare system. For example, if you're in a low-income country, you are 3 times more likely of dying in hospital following a spinal cord injury than you would be in a high-income country.
Ms. Officer says many of the causes of spinal cord injury deaths in poor countries are preventable. These include urinary tract infections and pressure sores, also known as bed sores. These are areas of damaged skin caused by a person staying in one position too long. Bed sores are usually not life-threatening problems in wealthy countries.
People with spinal cord injuries can live pretty much the same amount of time as somebody without a spinal cord injury. There's a slight difference, but certainly life expectancy has increased considerably in high-income countries, and it's not the case in low-income countries.
Experts suggest immediate action if a spinal cord injury is suspected, including immobilization of the spine, restricting its movement. The WHO says that should be followed by what it calls care appropriate to the level and severity of the injury, degree of instability of the spine, and compression of nerves. It also suggests skilled rehabilitation and mental health services. The WHO notes that up to 30% of people with spinal cord injuries show clinically significant signs of depression.
There is currently no cure for paralysis from spinal cord injuries, but many researchers are looking for one. Alana Officer says there is much that can be done to prevent such injuries, including building safer roads and vehicles, reducing drinking and driving, and wearing seatbelts. Other measures include improving safety in sports and the workplace, and adding window guards to windows. She says spinal cord injuries would be reduced if doctors could identify and treat tuberculosis earlier, and by improving nutrition to reduce spina bifida cases.
Finally, scientists have used stem cell technology to create working lung cells. Researchers say stem cells also could be used to create new drugs to treat diseases that restrict breathing. And they think the cells could one day create tissue for lung transplant operations. The research is another step toward what is being called personalized medicine. Over the past several years, scientists have used stem cells and growth factors to force the body's master cells to create other cells. This process has created heart, intestinal, liver, nerve, and insulin-producing cells as possible replacements for diseased organs. Now, scientists at Columbia University in New York City have changed stem cells into working, functioning lung cells, at least in the laboratory. The scientists say this could help researchers develop drugs and transplants to treat deadly diseases.
Hans Snook is a professor of microbiology and immunology at Columbia's medical school. He led the study. He says researchers were able to create 6 human lung and airway cells. One of the cells produced a substance called surfactant. In the lungs, surfactant keeps the body's air passageways open, letting people breathe.
We know that the cells that we made can make surfactant, can recycle it, can secrete it again, so we know that they do what they're supposed to do. And these cells are very essential in lung disease.
He adds that impaired surfactant production causes pulmonary fibrosis, a deadly lung condition. In experiments, researchers showed they could make embryonic stem cells become lung tissue. They used proteins that tell the body's master cells to become lung tissue. Some people have criticized the use of embryonic stem cells because they come from human embryos. That is why the researchers turned to what they call induced pluripotent stem cells. These are skin and other kinds of cells that can act like progenitor cells.
All of the experiments produced human lung tissue. The researchers placed this tissue into the kidneys of mice. Dr. Snook says the implanted cells grew and began acting like lung tissue. Researchers will be able to use the cells as a model for treatments for disabling and deadly lung diseases, like cystic fibrosis. Dr. Snook says lung transplants often are not successful. But in the future, he says, scientists may be able to engineer transplantable donor lungs by removing all of their cellular material. They would then seed the remaining structures with lung cells created from the skin cells of the transplant patient.
In this way, we hope to be able to one day, but this is years away, to make a lung that a recipient, someone in need of a transplant, will not reject, because all the cells in this lung are made from the same patient.
A report on the creation of lung tissue from stem cells was published in the journal Nature Biotechnology.
This Science in the News was written by Christopher Cruz. Our producer was June Sims. And I'm Faith Lapidus.
And I'm Christopher Cruz. Join us again next week for more news about science on the Voice of America.